They don't pause because they're unsure. They pause because they're processing more than you think. While most people react instantly, a Sigma INFJ steps back for a second, and in that second, something complex is happening. They're not just hearing your words, they're reading your tone, your intention, and the pattern behind what you're saying. What looks like silence is actually a process. They filter emotion from logic, separate what matters from what doesn't, and predict how their response will shape the outcome. They're not trying to respond fast, they're trying to respond accurately. And that small pause is what gives them an advantage most people never notice. In this video, we're breaking down why Sigma INFJs pause before responding and what's actually happening inside that silence. The internal process, the pattern recognition, and the reason their responses feel so precise when they finally speak. If you've ever noticed someone go quiet before saying something that completely shifts the conversation, stay until the end. And subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind for more insights into the quiet strategies that most people overlook. They separate emotional tone from actual meaning before reacting. Emotion detected, meaning isolated, reaction delayed. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ hears something and doesn't respond immediately, not because they didn't understand it, but because they understood too much at once. The tone carries emotion, tension, frustration, pressure, but beneath that, there is meaning, and instead of reacting to how it feels, they pause to extract what is actually being said. This separation happens instantly, but quietly. The INFJ filters the emotional layer first. Is the tone influencing the message? Is the delivery amplifying something that isn't fully accurate? They recognize that tone can distort meaning. A calm statement can carry intent. A loud one can carry confusion. And if they react to tone alone, they are no longer responding to reality. They are responding to emotion, so they remove it. Internally, they strip the message down to its core. From the outside, this looks like hesitation, like they are taking too long, thinking too much, not engaging fast enough. But internally, it is precision. They are deciding what deserves a response and what does not. The emotional charge of the moment loses its influence, and what remains is the structure of the message itself. And once that structure is clear, the response becomes controlled. What makes this powerful is that it prevents manipulation and escalation at the same time. Emotional tone is often used to provoke reaction, to push someone into responding quickly, defensively, or emotionally. But when the INFJ separates tone from meaning, that pressure disappears. They are no longer reacting to intensity, they are responding to content. Over time, this becomes a pattern. The Sigma INFJ doesn't get pulled into conversations by how they feel in the moment. They create distance between emotion and interpretation, and in that distance, clarity forms. Their responses don't match the energy they receive, they match the meaning they extract. Because for the Sigma INFJ, control begins with interpretation, and when emotion is no longer dictating meaning, the response is no longer reactive. It becomes deliberate, precise, and impossible to easily influence. They scan for hidden intentions behind the words heard. Intention questioned, motive uncovered. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ listens and doesn't stop at what is being said. The sentence is clear, the message is direct, but something feels incomplete. Not wrong, not obvious, just layered, and instead of accepting it at face value, they look beneath it. What is this really trying to do? What outcome is this meant to create? This scan happens instantly. The INFJ separates the surface from the structure. They ask themselves what the words are achieving, not just what they are expressing. Is this meant to persuade, to control, to test, to avoid something? The intention doesn't always match the words. And when that misalignment appears, even slightly, the INFJ doesn't ignore it. They track it. From the outside, nothing changes. The conversation continues normally. The Sigma INFJ remains calm, present, responsive. But internally, they are no longer just listening. They are decoding. They are connecting tone, timing, context, and behavior into a pattern. And within that pattern, intention becomes visible. Not fully, not with certainty, but clearly enough to guide how they respond. What makes this powerful is that it removes surface-level influence. Words can be adjusted, tone can be controlled, but intention leaks through consistency. The INFJ doesn't rely on one moment to define it. They observe across interactions, confirming whether the underlying motive stays the same. And when it does, the pattern becomes stable. Over time, this becomes automatic. The Sigma INFJ doesn't need to search for hidden meaning. It becomes part of how they listen. They don't just hear communication, they interpret its direction. Because for the Sigma INFJ, words are not the final layer of meaning, they are the entry point. And once you understand what drives them, you don't just respond to what is said, you respond to why it was said in the first place. They compare what's being said to past patterns they've observed, present input, past reference, pattern alignment. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ hears something and it doesn't stay in the present. The words land, but instantly they are compared. Not consciously, not slowly, but automatically. This sounds familiar? This tone has appeared before. The structure matches something already seen. And in that second, the present is no longer isolated. It becomes part of a pattern. This comparison is precise. The INFJ doesn't recall memories randomly. They match structures. How did similar words play out before? What happened when someone used that tone? What outcome followed that type of behavior? These references don't stay abstract. They guide interpretation. The current message is filtered through what has already been experienced, already understood, already confirmed. From the outside, this process is invisible. The conversation continues. The Sigma INFJ appears calm, focused, engaged. But internally, they are not reacting to the moment alone. They are validating it against a larger system. If the pattern aligns, the meaning becomes clearer, faster. If it doesn't, that difference becomes equally important. What makes this powerful is that it reduces uncertainty. Most people react based only on what is happening now. The INFJ responds based on what has happened before in similar structures. They don't need to wait for the situation to unfold completely. The pattern already provides direction. Not certainty, but probability strong enough to influence their response. Over time, this builds a layered perception. The Sigma INFJ doesn't see conversations as isolated events. They see them as repeating forms, evolving slightly but carrying the same underlying structure. And once that structure is recognized, the response becomes more accurate. Because for the Sigma INFJ, understanding doesn't come only from the present, it comes from how the present connects to the past. And when those connections are clear, they don't just hear what is being said, they recognize what it usually leads to. They filter out what is irrelevant to avoid unnecessary response noise removed, focus narrowed, response simplified. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ hears everything, but chooses almost nothing to respond to. The words come in layers, tone, emotion, exaggeration, distraction, but they don't treat all of it as equally important. They separate signal from noise, and most of what seems urgent in the moment doesn't pass the filter. This filtering is precise. The INFJ scans for what actually matters. What is the core point here? What affects the outcome? What is just emotional overflow, repetition, or pressure to react? They strip the conversation down to its essential structure. Everything else, the added intensity, the unnecessary details, the attempts to provoke, gets ignored internally. Not dismissed blindly, but recognized as irrelevant to the actual exchange. From the outside, this can feel like selective listening, like the Sigma INFJ is not engaging fully, not responding to everything that was said. But internally, it is controlled focus. They are choosing not to respond to elements that would only expand the situation without adding clarity. And because of that, their response becomes shorter, cleaner, more direct. What makes this powerful is that it prevents escalation through distraction. Many conversations grow unnecessarily because people respond to everything at once. Tone, emotion, side comments, implied meaning. The INFJ avoids this entirely. By filtering out what doesn't matter, they reduce the interaction to what can actually be resolved or understood. Over time, this becomes consistent. The Sigma INFJ doesn't get pulled into every layer of communication. They decide which parts deserve attention and which ones don't. And by doing that, they maintain clarity while others get lost in complexity. Because for the Sigma INFJ, control is not about handling more information. It is about handling the right information. And when everything irrelevant is removed, the response is no longer reactive. It becomes focused, efficient, and difficult to disrupt. They predict multiple possible outcomes of each response. Future paths, multiple outcomes, response mapped ahead. There's a moment when the Sigma INFJ is about to speak, and instead of choosing words immediately, they pause to see where each option leads. One sentence could calm the situation, another could escalate it, a third could shift the dynamic completely. And before anything is said, these paths are already visible in their mind. This prediction is not random. It comes from accumulated pattern recognition. The INFJ has seen how similar words create similar reactions, how certain tones trigger defensiveness, how specific phrasing opens or closes people. They don't just think about what they want to say, they think about what it will cause. Each response becomes a potential chain reaction, and they evaluate those reactions before choosing one. From the outside, this pause can feel like hesitation, like they are overthinking something simple. But internally, it is selection. They are deciding which outcome is worth creating. Not every truth needs to be said immediately. Not every reaction needs to be triggered. And once they see the possible directions, they choose the one that aligns with their goal. What makes this powerful is that it prevents unintended consequences. Most people react and then deal with the outcome afterward. The Sigma INFJ does the opposite. They consider the outcome first and then decide whether the response is worth it. If none of the outcomes serve a purpose, they choose silence. If one creates clarity, they move with precision. Over time, this becomes automatic. The Sigma INFJ doesn't move blindly through conversations. They navigate them with awareness of cause and effect. Every word is not just expression, it is a decision that shapes what happens next. Because for the Sigma INFJ, communication is not just about the present moment, it is about direction. And when you can see where each response leads before you say it, you don't just participate in the interaction, you choose the outcome before it unfolds. They decide the goal of their reply before forming it. Clear, objective, intent defined. Words follow purpose. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ pauses, not to find words, but to decide what those words are meant to do. Not what sounds right, not what sounds right, not what feels right. What result should this create? Calm the situation, set a boundary, redirect the conversation, or end it completely? Before the sentence exists, the objective is already chosen. This decision changes everything. Most people speak to express. The INFJ speaks to achieve. They don't let emotion decide the direction of their reply. They define it first. If the goal is clarity, the response becomes direct. If the goal is de-escalation, the tone becomes controlled. If the goal is distance, the reply becomes minimal. Each outcome shapes the structure of what they say. The words are not random, they are aligned with intent. From the outside, this looks effortless, like they always say the right thing at the right time. But internally, it is structured. The Sigma INFJ does not react to the moment blindly. They pause, define the purpose, and only then allow the response to form. And because of that, their words rarely create unintended direction. They are not just responding, they are guiding. What makes this powerful is that it removes confusion. When you don't know what your response is meant to do, you risk saying too much, too little, or something that leads the situation in the wrong direction. The INFJ avoids this entirely. They anchor their reply to a clear outcome and everything else is filtered out. Over time, this becomes automatic. The Sigma INFJ doesn't enter conversations without direction. Even in small interactions, there is a subtle awareness of purpose. They don't just speak, they move the interaction toward a specific point, even if it's not obvious to others. Because for the Sigma INFJ, communication is not just expression, it is execution. And when the goal is clear before the words exist, the response is no longer reactive. It becomes intentional, controlled, and effective. They adjust their tone based on the other person's psychology, tone calibrated, psychology read, delivery adapted. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ knows exactly what they want to say, but doesn't say it the same way to everyone. The message stays consistent, but the tone changes. Not randomly, not emotionally, deliberately, because they understand something most people overlook. The same words land differently depending on who receives them. This adjustment begins with observation. The INFJ reads the person in front of them, how they respond to pressure, how they handle directness, what triggers defensiveness, what allows openness. Someone driven by ego requires a different tone than someone driven by insecurity. Someone who avoids conflict reacts differently than someone who seeks it. These differences don't stay unnoticed. They guide how the message is delivered. From the outside, this can seem subtle. The Sigma INFJ may sound calm with one person, firm with another, minimal with someone else. But internally, it is structured. They are not changing their message, they are optimizing how it is received. They remove unnecessary friction, reduce resistance, and increase clarity by matching tone to psychology. What makes this powerful is that it increases effectiveness without increasing intensity. Instead of forcing a message through resistance, the INFJ aligns it with the listener's mindset. The conversation becomes smoother, the response more natural, the outcome more likely to match the intended goal. There is no need to push harder when the delivery already fits. Over time, this becomes automatic. The Sigma INFJ doesn't communicate in one fixed way. They adapt without losing consistency. They remain clear in meaning, but flexible in expression. And because of that, they are rarely misunderstood. Not because they speak more, but because they speak in a way that fits. Because for the Sigma INFJ, communication is not just about what is said, it is about how it is received. And when tone aligns with psychology, the message doesn't need force. It reaches exactly where it needs to. They choose between speaking, redirecting, or staying silent. 3 options. 1 decision. Control maintained. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ pauses, and instead of reacting automatically, they evaluate what kind of response the situation actually requires. Not every moment needs words. Not every situation should continue in the same direction. And not every silence is absence. So before anything happens, they choose speak, redirect, or remain silent. This choice is structured. If clarity is needed, they speak directly, precisely, without excess. If the situation is moving in the wrong direction, they redirect, shifting the focus, changing the tone, guiding the conversation without confrontation. And if neither action serves a purpose, they stay silent, allowing the moment to pass without feeding it. Each option is not random. It is selected based on outcome. From the outside, this can feel unpredictable. Sometimes the Sigma INFJ responds immediately. Sometimes they change the subject in a way that feels natural. Other times, they say nothing at all. But internally, each of these responses is intentional. They are not reacting to pressure. They are deciding how much the situation deserves. What makes this powerful is that it prevents unnecessary involvement. Most people default to speaking, even when it adds nothing. The INFJ avoids this. They don't respond just because something was said. They respond only when it serves a purpose. And when it doesn't, they let the moment exist without interference. Over time, this becomes consistent. The Sigma INFJ doesn't get pulled into every conversation fully. They navigate it with options, not impulses. They understand that silence can reveal more, redirection can resolve more, and speaking can clarify more, but only when used at the right moment. Because for the Sigma INFJ, communication is not automatic, it is selective. And when you can choose between speaking, redirecting, or staying silent, you are no longer reacting to the interaction. You are controlling how it unfolds. They compress everything into a short, precise response, minimal words, maximum clarity, no excess. There is a moment when the Sigma INFJ has already processed everything, and what comes out is only a few words. Not because they have less to say, but because they have removed everything that doesn't need to be said. The layers, the emotions, the unnecessary details, all filtered out. What remains is the core. This compression is deliberate. The INFJ has already separated tone from meaning, intention from expression, relevance from distraction. By the time they speak, the response has been refined internally multiple times. They don't explain everything they understood. They deliver only what serves the purpose. And because of that, their response feels direct, sometimes even unexpected in how simple it is. From the outside, this can feel surprising. Others may expect a longer explanation, more detail, more engagement, but instead they receive something short and complete, a sentence that answers everything without expanding the conversation unnecessarily. And that brevity carries weight because it is not rushed, it is precise. What makes this powerful is that it reduces noise and increases impact. Long responses can dilute meaning, create confusion, open unnecessary paths for reaction. The Sigma INFJ avoids this by staying focused. Each word has a function. Each phrase moves the interaction toward its intended outcome. Nothing is added without purpose. Over time, this becomes consistent. The Sigma INFJ doesn't speak more to feel heard. They speak less to be clear. They trust that precision carries more influence than volume, and because of that, their responses are not easily dismissed. They land exactly where they need to. Because for the Sigma INFJ, communication is not about how much is said, it is about how accurately it is delivered, and when everything unnecessary is removed, what remains is not just shorter, it is stronger, sharper, and impossible to ignore. That pause you see isn't hesitation, it's a system. While most people react in seconds, the Sigma INFJ runs through layers: intention, pattern, outcome, timing, and by the time they speak, the response is already refined. That's why it feels different, because it is. If you've ever been told you think too much before responding, now you know the truth. You're not slow, you're precise. Let me know in the comments which part of this process you relate to the most. And if you want to master this level of clarity without overcomplicating it, subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind, where silence isn't empty, it's calculated.